You ever notice how the housing market can look fine on paper, right up until the day it doesn't? Like one week you're hearing prices are holding, and the next week you're hearing buyers are back, and the whole time your gut is whispering something different. Because the warning signs don't show up like a movie, they show up like a slow leak, quiet, boring, easy to ignore. And then one day, it hits. So today we're talking about the title on purpose: Housing Market Warning Signs. What a slowdown looks like before it hits. Because if you wait for the headline that says, housing is in trouble, you're already late. Before we go any deeper, quick disclaimer: this is not personal financial advice. This is education and entertainment, based on public data and history. And you should always do your own research before making big money decisions, especially with something as serious as a home. Now let's answer the question everyone is really asking. What does a housing slowdown look like before it hits your street? It looks like the market stops feeling alive. Not with a crash, with a change in behaviour. And right now, as of January 5th, 2026, that behaviour change is getting louder. Here's why this matters right now. Because the Federal Reserve just cut rates again in December to a target range of 3.5% to 3.75%. And a lot of people heard that and thought, okay, cool, housing will bounce. But that's the machine's favourite trick. They take one number that sounds comforting and use it to distract you from 10 numbers that are turning ugly. Mortgage rates did come down from the highs. Freddie Mac's weekly survey had the average 30-year fixed mortgage around 6.15% at the end of December. And yes, that's lower than it was when it flirted with 7. But here's the so what? If you're a normal person, you don't buy houses with percentages. You buy houses with monthly payments, and a 6.15% payment on a home that got priced up during the frenzy still feels like trying to breathe through a straw. So affordability stays tight. And when affordability stays tight, the housing market doesn't crash first. It slows first. Now let's talk about what slow actually looks like in real life. Because this is where people get fooled. They stare at the final scoreboard, prices, and miss the game happening underneath. The slowdown shows up in the little behaviours first. It shows up in time. Homes take longer to sell. Buyers hesitate longer before committing. Sellers start testing the market instead of commanding it. For example, Redfin recently showed pending home sales falling about 5.8% from a year earlier in mid-December, and the typical home taking around 52 days to go under contract. That doesn't sound dramatic, but here's the so what. A market that is truly hot does not need time. Hot markets move fast. When time starts stretching, it means buyers are no longer scared. They're picky. And when buyers get picky, sellers start paying the price, just not always in the way you expect. Because the next warning sign is not always price down. It's concessions. It's the seller paying closing costs. It's rate buydowns. Fool. It's upgrades and freebies. It's the house sitting there with fresh photos every 2 weeks like it's begging for attention. And then, eventually, it's price cuts. Zillow has been talking about price cuts showing up in a big way, with cuts adding up to around $25,000 on a typical listing in their data. And again, the so what is simple. Sellers don't cut prices because they feel generous. They cut prices because the market stopped clapping. Now zoom out one level. The National Association of Realtors reported existing home sales running at an annual pace of about 4.13 million in November, with total inventory around 1.43 million homes. About 4.2 months of supply. Here's what that translates to in human language. That's not a flood of homes. That's not everyone panic selling. But it is a market where supply is no longer disappearing instantly, and where buyers have more room to negotiate than they did a year ago. That's what a slowdown looks like. Not a scream, a yawn. Now let's talk about the warning signs that people never want to talk about, because these are the signs that make housing go from slow to oh no. Credit stress. This is the part the machine hates because it exposes the real truth. Housing doesn't break because people change their mind. Housing breaks when people can't pay. So you watch delinquencies, You watch late payments. You watch the quiet stress rising in the background. The Mortgage Bankers Association reported that mortgage delinquencies rose in the third quarter of 2025, with the overall delinquency rate around 3.99%. And the so what? Senkiti is not we're doomed. The so what is that stress moves in layers. Prime borrowers usually hold up the longest. The cracks start in the weaker parts first, and the MBA data showed that clearly, especially in government-backed loans. When the starter home borrower starts slipping, it matters. Because that's the base of the ladder, and housing is a ladder market. If the bottom rung gets wobbly, the whole ladder starts shaking. Now stack that on top of broader consumer stress. The Federal Reserve's bank data had credit card delinquency around 2.98% in the third quarter of 2025. Again, that number alone doesn't end the world, but here's what it means in real life. If your credit card is starting to run late, you are not thinking about upgrading your home. You are thinking about survival. And when enough households shift into survival mode at the same time, housing demand doesn't vanish with a bang. It fades. Now let's talk about the warning sign that looks good at first. Rates falling. Because this is where the machine really gets you. They know you're exhausted. They know you're waiting for relief. So they float this story. Once rates drop, everything will be fine. But here's the trap. In the real world, rates often fall because something is weakening. Sometimes it's inflation cooling, sometimes it's growth cooling, sometimes it's the job market cooling. And housing's not just about rates. Housing's about confidence. If people feel stable, they buy. If people feel shaky, they freeze. And freezing is exactly what a slowdown looks like. Now let's name the villain, because we're not doing the polite version of this. The villain is the machine. The machine turned shelter into a financial product. They turned a place to live into a wealth vehicle. They trained everyone to treat homes like stocks, and then they act shocked when the market behaves like a stock market. The machine also controls the narrative. They'll tell you housing is resilient while you're watching houses sit. They'll tell you the market is healthy while you're watching sellers cut prices 3 times. They'll tell you it's localized while the same pattern shows up in city after city. Because their goal is not clarity, their goal is calm. Calm people don't ask questions. Calm people keep signing. Calm people keep borrowing. Now let's go to the proof section, because none of this is new. If you want to understand what a housing slowdown looks like before it hits, you study the last time the bridge cracked. 2005, 2006, 2007. People think the housing crisis started in 2008. No, 2008 was just the moment the crowd finally looked up. The early signs were boring, inventory rising, days on market stretching, sellers offering incentives, certain borrowers falling behind, certain neighbourhoods seeing bigger discounts. And the scariest part, in the beginning, prices didn't collapse everywhere. That's why people laughed off the warnings. The machine loves that phase, because it creates maximum confusion. Half the country says, I don't see it. The other half says, something's off. And while everyone argues, the stress spreads quietly through the plumbing. That's why the best warning signs are not always prices. The best warning signs are the behaviours that lead to forced selling: job insecurity, payment shock, credit stress, and time. Because time is the enemy of a leveraged market. If you need to sell fast, you are at the mercy of the buyer. If buyers are slow, you lose power. If you lose power, you start cutting. And that's how slow turns into down. Now here's the slogan pivot, and I want you to actually feel it. Because it is not a question of if, only when. Not because we're rooting for disaster, but because cycles are real. And the housing market is a cycle. Sometimes it's a boom, sometimes it's a freeze, sometimes it's a slow bleed, sometimes it's a snap. Your job is not to predict the exact day. Your job is to recognize the bridge cracks early, so you're not standing in the wrong place when the weight shifts. So let's do the pivot. Imagine the housing market like a giant bridge. When a bridge is healthy, it feels solid. Cars move smoothly. Nobody thinks about it. A slowdown is when the bridge starts showing tiny cracks. Not enough to collapse. Enough to change how people move. First, the speed limit drops. That's your longer days on market. Then one lane closes. That's your price cuts and concessions. Then the inspectors show up and start tapping the beams. That's your delinquency data. Your credit stress. Your buyer hesitation. And the key is this: you don't wait for the bridge to fall to change your route. You change your route when the first lane closes. Now let's make this easy. A two-part plan, not to scare you, to steady you. Part 1 is what you do before the bridge starts shedding bolts. First, protect the paycheck. Because in a housing slowdown, the job market doesn't always crash. But it does get weirder. Hours get cut. Bonuses disappear. Hiring gets picky. Layoffs hit certain sectors first, so you prepare like an adult. You tighten your resume. You build one extra skill that makes you harder to replace. You think about a backup income stream, even if it's small. Not to get rich, to reduce fear. Because fear makes people make stupid housing decisions. Second, write your rules sheet. This is the most underrated move in money. 1 page. What you will do, what you will not do, what you actually understand. Because when housing gets confusing, everyone around you becomes a salesman. Your friend becomes a realtor. Your cousin becomes a lender. The internet becomes a megaphone screaming, buy now or never buy. Your rules sheet is your spine. It stops you from making a life-changing decision inside an emotional moment. Now, part 2 is what you do after the first lane closes. First, act in layers. No heroic all-in moves. If you're a buyer, that means you don't fall in love with the first house you see. You shop like someone with a pulse. You negotiate. You compare. You move slowly on purpose. If you're a homeowner, that means you don't panic. You don't doom scroll. You don't make a rash refinance decision because a headline scared you. Layers means small, thoughtful steps. Second, keep optionality. This is the one the machine never teaches. Optionality means flexibility. It means you don't trap yourself with new fixed payments when the road is uncertain. It means you don't stretch your budget to impress people who won't pay your mortgage. It means you leave yourself room to breathe. Because when a slowdown becomes a real downturn, the people who suffer the most are the people who have no room. No room in the budget, no room in the schedule, no room in their choices. And that's not a moral failing, that's a math problem. Now let me bring it home. The reason this video matters is not because I want you scared of housing. It's because I want you to stop being surprised by housing. The machine needs you surprised. They need you thinking the market came out of nowhere. They need you making decisions late, emotional, and rushed. But once you know what a slowdown looks like, the longer selling times, the rising concessions, the price cuts, the softening price growth, the credit stress creeping in at the edges, you stop feeling crazy, you stop feeling like you missed it, and you start moving like someone who can see. So if you want to play this right, don't obsess over the loud headline. Watch the quiet behavior, watch the bridge cracks, and stay steady. Because steady people don't get bullied by the cycle. And a final reminder, I am not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. This video is for education and entertainment only. Every investment carries risk, nothing is guaranteed, and you should always do your own research and make your own decisions.